you've been planning this all along. What kind of monster are you? Seth spat out, his face contorted with shock. I could only smile. The kind who's had enough. It all started 3 days ago when I stumbled upon explicit texts on Seth's phone. He'd left it on the kitchen counter, buzzing incessantly. Curiosity got the best of me, and there they were. Texts from a woman named Brooke, laced with promises and scandalous photos. My pulse quickened, and my vision blurred as I scrolled through the damning evidence. That evening, I confronted him while we washed up from dinner. "Who's Brooke?" I asked, doing my best to keep my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. He dropped the dish he was rinsing. It shattered on the kitchen floor, an apt metaphor for the sense of betrayal shredding my insides. "Alicia, I can explain," he stammered. "Go ahead." My arms were crossed and I raised an eyebrow, daring him to lie to me. Seth sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "It was a mistake, a one-time thing. I was lonely, and she was just there. It didn't mean anything, I swear." I tilted my head, weighing the sincerity in his eyes with the venom in those texts. "How long has it been going on?" His shoulders sank. "A few months," he admitted, voice barely more than a whisper. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Months, Seth? And you're calling it a mistake?" I clenched my fists, my voice rising. "That's not how mistakes work." He moved closer, pleading, "Alicia, please. I'll do anything to make this right. I've been such a fool. I love you, not her." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you love me?" I began pacing the kitchen, my thoughts racing. "Here's what's going to happen. You'll cut off all contact with her. You'll account for all your time when you're away from me. You screw this up, and it's over, Seth. Do you understand?" He nodded frantically. "I'll do it. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I just want us to be okay." "Actions, not words," I muttered, turning away to hide the tears welling up in my eyes. That night we slept back to back, an invisible chasm wider than our king-sized bed separating us. The sense of betrayal gnawed at me relentlessly, but I vowed silently not to be a passive victim. If Seth could play dirty, so could I. The next morning the house was eerily silent. Seth left for work, his movements careful, his posture pained. I stared at his retreating figure, feelings of disbelief mingling with a cold, budding resolve. As a paralegal, I knew a thing or two about gathering evidence. There would be no more sweeping things under the rug. This time, retribution would follow. Standing in the doorway, I watched him drive away, my mind racing with thoughts of how to outmaneuver this betrayal. This was war now. Turning back inside, I pulled out my phone and typed a number. "Louise? I need to talk. It's about Seth. No, not just talk. Plan." And thus began my careful descent into Seth's web of deceit, determined to tear it down strand by sordid strand. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine and scrutiny. I watched Seth like a hawk, making sure he adhered to the strict conditions I'd set. He'd text me whenever he left work, checked in throughout the day, and made a point of coming home on time. His efforts seemed sincere, but the wound was still fresh, the trust broken. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch watching TV, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, eyes darting up to see if I'd noticed. I pretended to be engrossed in the show, but saw the flash of guilt on his face. "Who's that?" I asked casually. He hesitated before answering. "Just a work thing. Nothing important." "Mind if I see?" I reached out my hand. "Really, Alicia? You don't trust me?" His voice was strained, defensive. "I think I have every right not to," I said, my voice icy. "Hand it over." Reluctantly, he did. It was a group message from his sales team, innocuous enough, but his hesitation had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Late-night work calls became a frequent occurrence again. He'd step outside to take them, trying to be discreet. The conversations were muffled, but I could sense the familiarity, the ease in his voice that clearly wasn't talking business. It was always the same excuse, just wrapping up a project. I played along, nodding, pretending to trust. One night, I followed him outside. "Who are you talking to, Seth?" He nearly jumped out of his skin. "Alicia! I'm just talking to Kevin, my manager. What's your problem?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "My problem is that this all feels very familiar, like history repeating itself." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I told you I'm not talking to Brooke anymore. I'm trying to fix this, Alicia. Are you?" I raised an eyebrow, because it sure doesn't feel that way. Days turned into weeks, and the signs kept resurfacing in subtle ways. His phone screen turned away from me, the extra minutes in the bathroom, the constant urgency in his voice during these work calls. One day, when he left his phone on the counter again, I took it. There were no traces of anything suspicious. He'd gotten smarter, more careful. But my gut told me differently. I needed concrete proof. That's when I decided to start quietly investigating. I noted down the numbers he called frequently, the times he was supposedly working late. I charted it all out. My mind focused on one goal: uncovering the truth. Louise was my sounding board, providing a mix of moral support and strategic advice. "Have you thought about hiring someone? A private investigator, maybe?" she suggested one evening over coffee. I nodded. "That's my next move. But first, I want to catch him slips up. He's bound to make a mistake." Just as I finished saying that, Seth walked in. He looked between us, suspicion etched on his face. "What's going on?" "Just catching up," I said, smiling sweetly. "Is that a problem?" He shook his head. "No, just felt like you were talking about me." I stood up, staring him down. "Paranoid much?" He didn't respond, just walked away, the tension palpable. His steps were careful, cautious. This had only just begun. The game of trust and deceit was still in play, and I intended to win. One Friday evening, I decided to leave work a bit early. I had a hunch, a bad feeling that had been simmering for days. Instead of taking my usual route, I drove by a small coffee shop several blocks from Seth's office. That's when I saw them, Seth and Brooke, sitting in a corner booth, their heads close together, sharing laughter and too many smiles. My heart raced and my hands tightened around the steering wheel. I parked across the street and pulled out my phone, discreetly snapping a few pictures. There was no mistaking the affection in their eyes. Seth had broken every promise. Back home, I paced the living room, my mind racing. There was no denying it now. I needed more than just photos. I needed concrete evidence for the upcoming storm. The next morning, I dialed the number Louise had given me. "Detective Rivera?" I asked when he answered. "Yes. And you are?" "Alicia. A friend referred me. I need help." He met me at a small diner later that evening. Detective Rivera was a seasoned investigator, his eyes sharp and observant. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "My husband's having an affair. Again, I need evidence, something I can use." He nodded, pulling out a notepad. "I need details. His schedule, places he frequents, the other woman's info, if you have it." I handed him a small folder. "It's all in there. Her name is Brooke." "I'll get started immediately," he said, standing up. "You'll hear from me soon." Over the next few days, Seth maintained his facade, acting like a devoted husband. But at night, when he was asleep, I would check the updates from Rivera, photos, timestamps, receipts, all piling up to form an undeniable narrative of deceit. One evening, I showed the updates to Louise. "He's a scumbag," she spat. "You should call him out right now." "Not yet," I replied, a glint of steel in my voice. "I need irrefutable evidence and a solid plan. I want to make sure he can't worm his way out." Louise nodded. "So, what's next?" "I'll confront Brooke," I said, the plan taking shape in my mind. "Make her confess in public." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Seth mentioned a business trip, and Brooke planned to meet him at a different location. I arranged a meeting with Brooke under the guise of wanting to understand her side, tricking her into thinking I was leaving Seth and needed closure. At the agreed time, I arrived early, positioning myself discreetly in the cafe. Brooke walked in, clearly confident, almost smug. We sat down, and I cut to the chase. "Brooke, how long has it been going on?" She smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Months. Seth told you it was over, didn't he? He lies easily." I pulled out my phone and pressed record. "Say that again." Brooke blinked, realizing too late. Fury and embarrassment flashed across her face. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes," I replied, standing up. "Now everyone knows." I gestured around, where curious onlookers had started paying attention. Brooke stormed out, and I left, feeling a small sense of triumph. One step closer. The next phase was calling Seth's bluff. He walked in that night, confused but with no idea what was coming for him. "How was your day?" he asked nonchalantly. "Eventful," I said, lifting my head, determination burning in my eyes. "Let's talk." And talk we would. But not before I laid out every piece of evidence, every lie, every betrayal. This wasn't over, far from it. The game had only just begun. Seth walked into the house, his smile fading as he saw me waiting in the living room. "Alicia, what's going on?" I stood, folding the folder of evidence. We need to talk, Seth. He laughed nervously. This sounds serious. It is. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table, spilling photos of him and Brooke along with timestamps and receipts. His face paled as he realized what he was seeing. What the hell is this? He muttered, flipping through the documents. You tell me, I shot back, arms crossed. This is crazy, Alicia. You've got it all wrong. This isn't what it looks like. I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. Isn't it? You said it was over. You said you'd cut her off. But these pictures, they say you've been lying to me every single day. Seth ran his fingers through his hair, frustration spilling over. Fine, all right. I lied, but it wasn't serious. It never was. You mean everything to me. I could feel my temper rising. How long, Seth? I demanded. How long have you been lying to my face? He hesitated. A few months, he admitted, averting his gaze. Months, and you thought I wouldn't find out? Did you really think you could keep deceiving me forever? I made a mistake, Alicia. I'm human. Everyone makes mistakes. But not everyone repeats them, I said coldly. This isn't a mistake, Seth. This is betrayal. His anger flared. And what about you, huh? Spying on me, hiring detectives? What does that make you? A woman who's had enough, I replied sharply. A woman who is done being played for a fool. You don't mean that, he said, stepping closer. We can work through this. I'll change, I swear. It's too late for that, I said, walking away. I pulled out my phone. I've been recording our conversations for weeks, every lie, every fake apology, and now I want you to go upstairs, get your things, and leave this house. Seth's eyes widened. You can't be serious. One more thing, I continued, not missing a beat. I've invited Brooke for a talk tomorrow. You'll join us. What? He looked bewildered. You're insane. I smirked. Maybe. But you'll be there, or I'll expose you before you even get a chance to defend yourself. The next day, I arranged to meet Brooke at a cafe. Just as planned, Seth walked in behind her. They both looked stunned to see each other. What is this? Brooke asked, her eyes darting between us. I casually pulled out my phone again. Just a friendly chat. Seth, why don't you start? Seth's face tightened. Alicia, please? Now, I growled. He took a deep breath. Brooke, it's over. Alicia knows everything. Brooke scoffed. You think this is over? We had something real, Seth. Real? I interjected. Real enough to lie to both of us? Seth sank into a chair, defeated. Brooke's eyes burned with anger. You tricked me, she hissed. Consider it a taste of your own medicine, I said, standing up. You deserve each other. Across the cafe, curious eyes watched as I walked out, my head held high. It was a small victory, but the war was far from over. With Seth humiliated and Brooke exposed, one phase of my plan was complete. Now it was time to take the next steps. This was only the beginning of Seth's downfall, and I was determined to see it through to the end. Seth came home that night with a dark, thunderous look. What the hell was that? He growled, slamming the door behind him. I stood my ground. That was a public service announcement. Now everyone knows the truth. His face twisted in anger. You've humiliated me, Alicia, in front of everyone. My colleagues, my friends. Did you expect any less after what you did? I shot back, arms crossed. You're insane, he snapped. You've lost it. Maybe I have, I said, voice steady. Maybe you drove me to it. Seth closed the distance between us, his eyes burning with rage. You're going to pay for this. You think you can just ruin my life? Your life? I scoffed. What about mine? You've lied, cheated, and turned it upside down. You deserve every bit of this. This isn't over, he threatened, but I didn't flinch. You think you can just walk away from this mess you created? I'm not walking away, Seth. I'm walking out. I've got the evidence, and I'm filing for divorce. His eyes widened in shock. You can't be serious. Oh, I am, I said, pulling out the papers I had prepared. Tomorrow, these go to Janet. She's already expecting them. Seth's fury escalated. You're just going to give up on us? Throw everything away? You already did that, I retorted. I'm just making it official. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the whole house seemed to shake. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. I made sure to record any interactions, his threats, his angry outbursts, all part of the plan. I went to see Janet, my lawyer and mentor. I've got everything we need, I said, handing her the folder. She flipped through the documents, nodding with approval. This is solid. He won't be able to refute this. Good, I said. He deserves everything that's coming. Janet looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. How are you holding up, Alicia? I'm fine, I replied, though the fatigue in my voice betrayed me. I just want this over with. Janet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're strong. You'll get through this. The following days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Seth's attempts to reconcile grew more desperate, more insistent. One night he showed up unannounced, his eyes wild and pleading. Please, Alicia, he begged, don't do this. We can fix this. There's nothing left to fix, I said firmly, not letting him see the slight tremor in my hand. This is the end. That's when his demeanor changed. He snapped, spilling out anger and venom. You'll regret this. You're going to end up alone. I'll take that risk, I said, stepping back. Now get out. That night I packed my things, moving out while he was still fuming in the driveway. As I drove away, I felt a mixture of fear and liberation. This was a new beginning, but I knew the battle wasn't over. My revenge was far from complete. Seth would feel the weight of his actions, and I would ensure justice was served. As I watched our house disappear in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but feel a fierce resolve hardening in my chest. This was just the beginning of the end for Seth. I stepped into Janet's office, the scent of coffee and paper mingling in the air. She greeted me with a firm handshake. Ready to get started? More than ready, I nodded. Janet took a seat at her desk, arranging the documents in front of her. We're going to throw everything we've got at him. Infidelity, threats. It's all here. Make sure he doesn't see it coming, I said, a determined edge in my voice. She smiled. He won't. Trust me. I've handled worse. The legal battle began swiftly. Seth was blindsided by the alimony and compensation case. I watched as the shock registered on his face when he was served the papers at work, standing beside Janet as she laid out our case with surgical precision. You're really doing this? Seth spat, a mixture of disbelief and rage in his eyes. Yes, I am, I said calmly. You brought this on yourself. Janet didn't miss a beat. Mr. Williams, your repeated infidelity and abusive behavior are all well documented. This case is airtight. Seth's lawyer, a middle-aged man with a perpetual frown, tried to interject. We'll contest these allegations. Janet leaned forward, sought her gaze unwavering. Feel free to try, but Alicia's evidence is overwhelming. You won't win this. Over the next few days, Seth's attempts to reconcile became almost pathetic. He called constantly, leaving voicemails filled with pleas and apologies. I didn't respond. Janet advised me to let the legal process play out without engaging him. He's desperate, she noted, reviewing the latest documents. Don't give him the satisfaction of breaking you down. I won't, I assured her. He's lost all his power over me. We went through Seth's finances meticulously, ensuring we traced every asset. The more we uncovered, the more it painted a picture of deceit and manipulation. Seth had underestimated my resolve and capability. The day we stepped into the courtroom, Seth looked worn out, shadows under his eyes betraying his sleepless nights. I stood tall, my heart pounding, but my mind focused. Janet presented our case with confidence, detailing Seth's betrayal and the emotional toll it had taken on me. Your Honor, Alicia deserves compensation for the years of deceit and abuse she has endured. Seth's lawyer attempted to paint a picture of marital discord, but the evidence was irrefutable. When it was over, the judge ruled in our favor. Seth was ordered to pay substantial alimony and part of our shared assets. Outside the courtroom, Seth approached me. Alicia, please. I shook my head. It's too late, Seth. This is justice, not revenge. You'll have to live with the consequences of your actions. His face crumbled. I never meant for it to end like this. You should have thought about that before, I replied, walking away. As I left the courthouse with Janet, I felt a sense of closure. This chapter of my life was ending, but I knew my journey wasn't over. There were still steps to take, and more to ensure Seth understood fully the cost of his betrayal. This was about more than just legal victory. It was about reclaiming my life. And I intended to do just that. Seth's downfall began to spiral faster than I anticipated. One morning, I received a tip that his company was planning a critical meeting. I seized the opportunity to act, delivering the evidence of his affair to his employer. Ethics and company policies were clearly outlined in their handbook, and Seth had breached them fundamentally. A couple days later, Seth's boss, Tom, called him into the office. I can only imagine the tension simmering in that room. I had made sure I had a witness, Louise, casually positioned in the lobby, ready to update me. Seth came out, his face ashen, lips pursed. He brushed past Louise without a word. Moments later she texted, "He's been let go." It worked. The gravity of what I had done hit me, but there was no turning back now. My actions carried consequences, but they were deserved. The truth's weight was mine to leverage. The phone rang that evening. Seth's voice was raw, demanding. "Alicia, you did this. They fired me because of you." I remained calm. "No, Seth, they fired you because of what you did. Affairs don't look good on a resume, do they?" "I'll find another job," he threatened, but there was a hollow quality to his words. "Good luck explaining why you lost this one," I replied, ending the call. Next, I reached out to contacts within our financial circles, subtly ensuring Seth's reputation was tarnished. He had underestimated my connections and resolve. The professional world is smaller than one thinks, and rumors spread like wildfire. Within weeks, Seth was struggling. He couldn't secure a job that matched his previous status. Each attempt met with cold rejections or awkward deflections. The money started running out, and the reality of his situation began to sink in. One afternoon, I decided it was time to deal with Brooke. I crafted an anonymous email to her gym, attaching the evidence of her affair with Seth. Within days, she was let go due to misconduct. Louise reported back gleefully, "Her reputation's in shreds. People are talking." Brooke called me, her voice frantic. "Alicia, why are you doing this? You've ruined my life." "You ruined mine first," I said coldly, hanging up the phone. She had meddled in my life, and now she faced the consequences. Weeks turned into a couple of months, and the power balance shifted entirely. Seth was financially ruined, his personal and professional life in tatters. He tried to reach out one last time, a broken man. We met in a small park, the fall leaves crunching underfoot. Seth looked disheveled, desperation seeping from his every pore. "What do you want, Seth?" I said, arms crossed. "Please, Alicia, I know I messed up, but I've lost everything. Help me get back on my feet. We can start over," he pleaded. I shook my head. "This isn't my problem. You did this to yourself." "You're heartless," he spat, the last bit of venom he could muster. "Call it whatever you want. I call it justice." I turned and walked away, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. This was a new beginning for me, and there was no room for anything or anyone that pulled me back. Moving to Oregon was the fresh start I desperately needed. Nestled in a small, supportive community, I rediscovered the pieces of myself that had been choked by betrayal and deceit. The air felt different, cleaner, without the weight of Seth's lies lingering around me. I spent my mornings jogging through tree-lined paths, feeling the tension drain with each step. I took up pottery, molding clay into shapes and forms that symbolized a new beginning, a message to myself that I could reshape my life. One sunny afternoon, I was in a local cafe, sipping on a latte and reading a novel. The bell above the door chimed, and Louise walked in, her face lighting up when she saw me. She had flown in to check on me as good friends do. "Alicia, you look incredible," she said, embracing me tightly. "I feel incredible," I replied with a grin. We sat and chatted about everything and nothing. For the first time in months, my laughter wasn't tinged with bitterness. It was pure, a sound I thought I'd lost forever. "You deserve this," Louise said, sipping her coffee. "Your strength through all this has been inspiring." "Thanks, Louise. I just had to find myself again." Later that evening, I joined a yoga class. The instructor, a gentle soul named Clara, led us through poses, each movement designed to center and calm. After the session, I felt a tranquility I hadn't known in years. Clara approached me. "You have a strong presence," she remarked. "Have you practiced yoga long?" "Not really," I laughed. "I'm just trying to find balance in my life again." She nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "You're doing wonderfully." The things I once enjoyed, baking, reading, gardening, filled my days now. I reveled in the simplicity, the normalcy. My little house quickly became a home, adorned with flowers and filled with the scent of fresh bread. One afternoon, while I was arranging a new flower bed, a neighbor, Mary, stopped by. She had a serene demeanor and an infectious smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, handing me a basket of freshly picked apples. "If you ever need anything, just holler." "Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that," I replied warmly. The sense of community here was palpable, and it made the transition easier. Weeks turned into months, and the shadows of the past receded. I reflected on my journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and ultimately, the justice I'd served. Each step had been painful but necessary. I was stronger now, more resilient. One evening I attended a local fair with some newfound friends. Amidst the music, laughter, and bright lights, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past no longer held power over me. I had walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but wiser and more determined. As I looked around, I realized that I wasn't alone in this realization. We all had our battles, our scars. But here, in this moment, we were simply living, breathing, and enjoying life. I took a deep breath and smiled. This, truly, was a new beginning. Stepping into the future with hope, I knew that whatever came next, I could face it with the strength and courage I had found within myself.